Middle East Report on Sabahul Muslim.
James, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. A pleasure to be with you as always.
So, amid concern that violence on the West Bank could escalate, the United States is urging Israel to help stabilize the Palestinian Authority, but it's failing to take Israel to task for the killing of the Palestinian-American journalist.
Indeed. So, you've had mounting violence on the West Bank, also in Gaza, of course, with the three-day Israeli attack several weeks ago. But particularly the concern is on the West Bank, where you've had in Jenin and other places confrontations with armed Palestinians, but also unarmed Palestinian youth. Keep in mind that you now have a generation of Palestinian youth who does not remember the intifadas of the 1990s and the early 2000s, and particularly the second intifada, which was quite violent. And so there is growing concern in Israel itself, and particularly in the Israeli security services, but also in the United States, that this could erupt again. You've had the top U.S. State Department official dealing with Israel and Palestine visiting the region this week. She has urged the Israelis to help strengthen the Palestine Authority of President Mahmoud Abbas, the feeling being that the authority increasingly is losing its grip, while at the same time the Palestinians have been very clear what they've said to her, which is the deteriorating situation is Israel and its occupation policy, and that's what has to change.
Now, efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal appear to be falling apart.
We seem to be going through a roller coaster. So you had, not that long ago, the European foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, who had put forward a proposal saying we are days away. And you had the U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, saying we're cautiously optimistic. Well, now we're hearing exactly the opposite. And that really has to do with a report that was filed this week by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which said it can no longer certify whether or not Iran is trying to make or build a nuclear weapon. And at the same time, the Iranians wanting the agency's investigation being shut down. The speculation is that this is not the end of the road, but that it's essentially both the United States and Iran may have an interest in postponing a revival of the agreement until after the U.S. Midterm elections, congressional elections in November. At that moment, it would be clear what the balance is between Democrats and Republicans in Congress, which is important to whether or not the deal would survive a second round. And the Iranians know where they stand. If the Republicans win that, they may very well argue, what's the point?
Now, Turkey awards more money to religious affairs than to trade, infrastructure, or home and foreign affairs in its 2023 budget.
Indeed. So Turkey has put forward its budget for the next year. This is a country in economic crisis. Inflation is more than 80%. There is widespread discontent. And President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who faces elections in the next year, and these are important elections because 1923 is the 100th year, is the centennial of the founding of the modern Turkish state out of the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. And so what you're seeing is that those ministries, trade, industry, disaster management, interior, foreign affairs, that really should be up front because they're the ones that can help Turkey deal with its, particularly with its economic problems, but also with other problems. They're getting less money than the Directorate of Religious Affairs that is part of the president's office. And it says something about where Mr. Erdogan's thinking is and how he thinks that a combination of religion and nationalism may be what gets him through the next election cycle.
And the UAE is looking to buy a second English football club.
Indeed. So you're getting an actually remarkable situation if it came to fruition, which is that in 2008, the United Arab Emirates bought Manchester City. There is a great deal of speculation that now Manchester United, the Glazer family, may be willing to sell Manchester United. There have been repeated attempts at buying the club from the Glazer family at somewhere around $3.5 billion, and that the foremost bidder for Manchester United would be Dubai, which would mean that not only would you have two major teams in the English Premier League, but also the two major teams of Manchester being owned by Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which are both Emirates in the UAE, with a certain degree of under-the-surface rivalry.
All right, James, as always, we really appreciate your time and your perspective.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great week.
All the best.
Listeners are reminded you can go to www.jamesdorsey.net to check James's articles. It's now 8:05.